Good day, folks. Welcome back to My Neck of the Woods. My name is Dika, where I share my experience and my knowledge, hoping to lessen your learning curve. So today I am going to talk about how to interpret some buck sign. Well, the deer sign in general, not necessarily buck sign, deer sign, and just some little things that I've learned over the years that can help you out and help you find more deer in the woods and eventually help you harvest more deer. All right, before I get started, please sub the channel, like my videos, and make some comments. You know that I love the comments. All right, so I'm going to talk about some buck sign. Now, this is very basic. So I'm going to go over tracks, runs, scat, rubs, and scrapes for the most part. And if you don't know what any of those are, I'm going to explain what they are, and just go from there. And my little tidbits on how you can interpret these and how it can help you in the woods to find more deer and eventually kill more deer for the most part. Put it up, more deer on your table for the most part. Now, I hunt predominantly in the suburbs. If this may not entirely apply to like big woods or fields or different areas, but this is my take on it and see how it helps you out. All right. First off, tracks. There are tracks everywhere. You have to be able to identify them. They're just like the hooves are just like this. You know, you'll see two sort of teardrop spots and then the foreclaws behind it. A lot of times you don't see those foreclaws, but for the most part, that's how you're going to identify where where a deer is traveling. Ideally, you want to get on a run. A run is a path that a deer travels on, and you'll be able to see them. But for the most part, when you're out there scouting deer, you want to find a run where there's tracks going both ways. It means maybe they come in, you know, from cover to food or from food to cover, and they travel this way, and then maybe towards the end of the day they travel back. You want to find that, and ultimately you want to try to find a crossroads of tracks, like a heavy trail going this way and then a heavy trail going this way, which is going to increase your chances of seeing a deer when you're out hunting. All right, but that's tracks for the most part. Ways to tell how big the deer is one by the size of the track. You know, you put your hand down next to it. If the track is as long as your fingers, as an adult person's fingers for the most part, it's a good size. A lot of them will be a little bit bigger. You know, they'll be upwards of this length, so to speak. Not really width, more length. So maybe what's that, 4 or 5 inches? You know, that's the bigger the deer, the longer the track's going to be for the most part. Sometimes you'll see the two hooves, they're down like this, and then they're kind of spread out and or pointed in different directions. It usually means one or two things. Either the deer is a little bit older or the deer is a little bit heavier. A lot of times you'll see it in the mud. So when they push down the mud, the two hooves will move out. It just means that the deer weighs a lot, or maybe they're a little front heavy or they're a little back heavy, which leads me to the next part of it, is identifying front and back. So if you see tracks, the mud is always the best place to find them, you know. But if you're looking in leaves or grass or whatever, when you see tracks, right, you're going to see two side by side probably. Or one will be staggered, one will be this way, and one will be a little bit further than the other one. Try to look for back ones, or maybe those are the back ones. Try to look for front ones. Try to look for the front and back, and then you may be able to identify whether that's a buck or a doe. The bucks are a little more sturdy up front, especially the older they get. So the front tracks are going to be a little bit wider than the back tracks. There's exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, the front tracks are going to be wider than the back tracks if it's going to be a buck. And it's the reverse for a doe. The back tracks are a little wider, they're a little more hefty in the back, you know, larger pelvises for giving birth. So they're going to be a little more hefty in the back. A lot of does have a skinny or a long neck, and they're really sort of petite in the front, so to speak, and then the wide hooves or the wide pelvis or their legs are wider in the back. So it's going to be wide tracks in the front, not slender, but less wide in the back is going to be a buck. Wider, skinnier in the front, and then wider in the back is going to be a doe for the most part. And that will help you identify maybe what's moving through the woods. And if you're, there's a lot of people that just hunt bucks. There's a lot of people that just hunt does. I do both, you know. So, but help you identify what's moving around. All right. Then there's runs. A run is just An area in the woods, this takes some time to identify. So just keep looking. The best thing to do is maybe if you have someone who hunts, show you what a run is, and then you'll be able to pick it up from there. But I've been hunting for years now, and I can really pick out a run. But say you find a run, it doesn't mean that it's a deer run. It could be just an animal run. It could be raccoons, or it could be even squirrels, or even coyotes, or wolves, or bears, or whatever's in your area. It doesn't mean that it's a deer run. But the deer could use it, so then you go back and you look for tracks on that run. Look for scat also. Scat's going to be the next one. But a run is just, you'll look and you'll peer into the woods and you'll see just a worn down path in the middle of the woods that just looks like it just gets a little bit more traffic than every other spot that you see. Some are very, very blatant. You'll see it, and it's all just tons of tracks and everything and lots of traffic. You could be old runs too, but that's going to help you find more deer. A lot of times when I'm searching a new spot, if I find a run, I'll just follow it. I'll go right on the run and I'll follow it and see where it leads. And then a lot of times it leads into like a crossroads where there's more traffic. Other times you'll see maybe some scrapes off or some rubs or whatnot. I'll get into those too, all right? So runs. Scat. When you find scat, shit, poop, whatever you want to call it, how to identify it? I don't think there is a way to identify whether it is male or female. A lot of people believe that if it's in a big log, it's going to be a buck. I think it's just based on diet and what the deer eat for the most part. If it's tiny little pebbles, it's probably a small doe. But everything outside of that is awfully difficult to depict whether it's a buck or if it's a doe. But what you want to do when you find scat is you want to identify, is it new or is it old? If it's brown and pitted and dry, it's old. If it's shiny and it looks almost wet, it's new. It's brand new for the most part. When it comes out of the deer, it comes out shiny, it almost looks wet. Sometimes, I'm not going to touch it, but you don't need to be touching deer poop. Sometimes I'll put my hand right over it, like an inch from it. So here's the scat, and I'll put my hand like this. Sometimes you can feel warmth. Say say there was a deer there 2 seconds before you got on that run, and if it looks brand new, I'll put my hand over it to see if it's warm, just to see if they were there for the most part. But if it's shiny, if it's kind of dull, but it's not dry, probably done within the last day or two, for the most part. But when it's dry and it's real pitted, it's very, very old. It's been rained on a bunch of times, and all the little other insects and stuff like that have picked at it for the most part. But if you find an area that has a lot of scat, if you just walk into, you're on a run and you're following it and you're tracking and whatnot, and all of a sudden there's just scat everywhere, chances are that there's bedding nearby. The deer get up, they take a poop. They don't poop where they sleep. They get up, they take a poop, and then they go on their merry ways, which is usually to food or to some cover or whatever it is. But for the most part, if you come across an area and it's just scat, chances are there's some bedding nearby. So look for the bedding. Look for the bedding. And bedding is awfully difficult to identify outside of scat or things like that. I'm going to do a whole nother video on how to identify bedding. You need some time to hone that skill. I think so. But anyway, all right. Beyond scat, we got an itchy nose. I have an itchy nose, I think, every video. All right, rubs. Rubs are on the trees. You're going to see the bark has been sort of ripped off or worn off. Bucks are only done by males, by bucks. Rubs are only done by bucks, and what you want to do is you want to find out, is it old or if it's new. If it's all worn off, oh my goodness, with the nose. If it's all worn off and it's real smooth, chances are it's old. Or if it's like a gray color, it's definitely old. It's years old. But if it has like an orange color to it, or like just from the underside of the soft part of a tree, chances are it's new. You want to look for shavings and footprints. So a lot of times they'll stand right there, and then they'll rub their antlers on the tree, and the shavings will come down. If you see shavings and footprints there, it was done within the last day, for the most part. Rubs are usually what they signify territory. So I'm not sure that there is any rhyme or reason as to which area is territory. Some people say, well, if the rub is on this side, then the territory is this way. I'm not sure that that holds water. I think the buck just marks territory. This is my territory here. I'm not sure there is any particular boundaries, really. They do them in lines sometimes. Sometimes there's a rub line. I have a video. I'll put it up in the corner of an actual rub line that I found. And, or corner. I don't know where it's going to be, where it shows up for the most part. And, but it does show territory. Now, it's not always a mature buck. It's a young buck growing up sometimes, and they're taught to mark their territory, and whether or not it's recognized by the other bucks in the herd or whatnot. But a young buck is even going to make rubs, just to show dominance and to mark their territory. Another thing with rubs, you may be able to tell the age of the deer sometimes. Now, a lot of people say that, like a larger mature buck will not rub smaller saplings or trees. That's not the case. I've seen big mature bucks rub saplings, but a younger deer is not going to rub high on a tree. So upwards of waist to chest height on a tree is going to be a mature deer. I'm talking about 3 feet high. The ones that are inches off the ground or even a foot off the ground, I'm not saying that they're not mature deer, but the ones that are higher are not young deer. Does that make sense? The mature deer will do saplings and all types of trees, but a mature deer will only do ones that are a little bit higher. The younger deer will not do that. And I'm talking about just the more dominant bucks in the area. All right? Scrapes. Scrapes are my friends. Scrapes are how you're going to find those bucks during hunting season. If you want to hunt bucks specifically, find scrapes. Go out, scout, find scrapes, put a camera up on it, see what buck is finding that scrape, and they'll come back and they'll freshen those scrapes, and they make hundreds of scrapes. And ultimately, a scrape is just a message board for deer to communicate during the breeding season, for the most part. They do communicate. There are scrapes that are year-round, but for the most part, they're really hot during, like, in Massachusetts here, it's October to like late November. Even into December, they'll still use them. But from October to November, they're really, really hot. Ways to tell if a scrape is active. Look in the dirt. If there is active scat in there or active hoof prints, and check your licking branch. Your licking branch is going to have an odor to it, and the earth is going to have an odor to it too. Don't touch your licking branch, and don't touch the scrape with your hands for the most part. But if there's a branch there, give it a sniff. Go up there and smell it. It's going to have an odor to it. And that's one way of telling that the scrape is active, because they're going to rub their orbital glands and their forehead glands on that licking branch. And then my goodness, with the itch. The ground, get down on your hands and knees, take a sniff. It's going to have a urine smell to it, or it's going to have a musky smell to it. It's not going to smell like dirt. That's another way of telling that it's active. You can always doctor them up. You can always add something to it. You can always add deer lure to them. In the early part of the season, I don't like to, but as the breeding season goes on, if a mature buck is tending to a scrape nearby and I put a camera on it and they're coming in often, I may doctor it up with something. I may put some dominant buck on there or some sort of estrus or whatever. Because a lot of times they'll be near those scrapes looking for does, or even looking for other dominant bucks to fight them, get them out of their territory for the most part. They get very, very aggressive, filled with testosterone. And the scrapes are kind of like every deer comes and they leave their personal identification. Like I said, it's like a message board. They say, I'm the dominant buck in this area, and I'm looking for does. Or the does are like, well, I'm ready to mate, or whatever. And it's a message board, and they all hit them. If you put a camera on a scrape, you'll be an active scrape, because they're not all active all the time. You'll be surprised at how many deer hit it during the day, like during the breeding season. It's amazing. Someone told me about scrapes a while back, and I always saw them, but I never put a camera on them. And I never paid too much attention to them. But scrapes are the key. Scrapes are the key, in my opinion, to even finding deer, for the most part, because there's so many deer that are going to come to that scrape on a daily basis, whether there's people around or not. All right, that's all I got for you. Sub the channel. I'll talk to you guys later. Be well.